And good morning.
Good morning.
Teresa has a wind-up clock.
Naturally.
But see, no, you can't really do that. Oh, you
Like,
can, but
yeah.
and now it ticks.
Yeah.
Ask not for who the winding clock ticks.
It ticks for thee.
Good morning.
Yep, this is now Bridge to a Better World, and we're just gonna do our little wind up toys and do a little pre-game action here. Pre-game non-action, I would say, in this case. And that's to allow y'all to
gather
tune
together.
in. Congrats to Jabbar last week. We didn't do any notification on Twitter. So for a few minutes, she was the only one on there. And today, however, I did tweet. Perhaps I'll tweet again as we wait.
As we gather together.
Together. Let's see, I put up, this is now Bridge to a Better World on my YouTube app, and it starts showing last week's show.
Well, honey, I don't know. But maybe this is the time we should start.
Yeah, okay. I don't know how to fix that. Well, anyway. We'll start with some headlines.
It's a good place to start, isn't it?
Full ticky out of the way here. It's a bright light. Is it okay for you?
Yeah, it's good. But you know what? I forgot to put in my earrings. I feel half naked.
Oh.
I can fix that.
Well, I want you being half naked.
Well, you just carry right on with your headlines.
Okay, then
And I just have my emergency pair of earrings here in my drawer.
Right. I'll leave it over here so people don't have to,
see me donning
too much earring information. I want to start with a quote from Frederick Douglass, 1857, a speech that he was giving about human nature, actually, which seemed strangely prophetic of the Civil War at the time for various reasons. But one of the things that he said was that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both, end quote. And he would know about words or blows.
We can come back.
All right. So my question is, what happens when people are so confused by propaganda that they can't even formulate a demand? We see it all around us, I think.
We do see that all around us. And there's actually so much to what happens when people are so molded by propaganda. There's a lot to that. That's going to be sort of the I think main the crust of our conversation, as it were. The nexus.
One of them.
Yes.
And, yeah, good. Okay. I would like to talk about that.
Good.
But first,
and we shall.
Some headlines. I'd like to thank my sister in Texas, an attorney, for sending me a notice from the ACLU. The ACLU said ICE's and CBP's warrantless purchases to access people's sensitive location information were first reported in early 2020. So that's, what ICE is, the border, and the CBP, talking about the border police, who've been given extraordinary powers, especially under Trump, as the sort of super secret police, and often claimed, and is absolutely in error, and someday will be reversed, I do hope, that anywhere within what is 100 miles of anything they designate as a border, the Constitution doesn't apply. That's absolute bullshit. The Constitution is the Constitution, and it applies everywhere in the United States, period. But returning to the ACLU's ratings, after the news broke, they said we submitted an FOIA request to DHS, ICE, and CBP and sued to force the agencies to respond. Well done, ACLU. Our litigation is still ongoing, but we're now making public the records that CBP, ICE, the U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Coast Guard, and several offices within the DHS headquarters have provided us to date. And that reminds me of the rescue, if you want to put that in quotation marks, of drowning Haitians who are then immediately put in handcuffs. It's like, who does that?
Right.
Only people who hate melanin. Anyway, what those records reveal is a massive privacy invasion by our government. ACLU writes, we released thousands of pages of previously unpublished documents that detail millions of taxpayer dollars being used by the Department of Homeland Security, this is security, to buy access to cell phone location information. Aggregated and sold by two shadowy data brokers, Ventel, that's with two N's, and Babel Street, Babel. The records expose the companies and the government's blatant attempts to rationalize this unfettered sale of mass data being quietly extracted from smartphone apps. To get around the Fourth Amendment and the Supreme Court precedent that protects similar cell phone location data against warrantless government access. So this is where I ask you to remember what Snowden told us about smurfing and all the things that they can do with their phones to look right up your ass anytime they want, all the time. The volume and detail, ACLU writes, of people's sensitive location information obtained by the DHS is staggering. Documents from one of the companies marketing the bulk location data to DHS brag about adding 15 billion location points from more than 250 million phones and other devices to its searchable database every day. CBP also turned over 7 redacted spreadsheets of location data it had paid for, a small subset of what's in Ventel's database. And they go on with more details. These documents, they write, are particularly concerning for the privacy right of people living near our nation's borders. A 2018 DHS internal document proposed using the location data to identify patterns of illegal immigration, threatening to indiscriminately sweep in information about people going about their daily lives in border communities. So this is where I talk about having a place for you that is special and secret and that you never talk about or take your cell phone to. I don't need to tell you why that's valuable. Given the collaboration between the militias and the police. You need that. There are such things as Faraday wallets, which can silence your phone's location beacon if you forget to. Okay, and so I'll go on to the second headline item.
Oh,
or do you want to?
I have a headline.
Okay, let's go back and forth on headlines.
But I do think that is stunning, and ICE has sort of fallen out of the headlines because so many other things are there, but we can never take our eyes off of ICE, right? We cannot forget about what the Department of Homeland Security is doing.
Yeah, ICE, the Children in Cages Agency.
Right. So thank you for that news. It's super important.
You're welcome.
I wanted to just bring up the fact that the very first Trader Joe's store has unionized. There's been an organizing effort at Trader Joe's, which has really just abhorrent union busting techniques and has successfully fought off workers' organizing efforts in the past. Well, no more. The store in Hadley, Massachusetts, which is in a suburb close to Springfield, I understand. Having been to Massachusetts exactly once, I don't know. But I understand it's a suburb, and it has, in fact, unionized, becoming the first of the Trader Joe's chain. There is a worker named Sarah. She has been with the company for 18 years, and she tweeted that she's voting yes for the union because as a captain and now crew member, she watched the company put profit over the well-being of the crew repeatedly. She said in her tweet, "It's time for us to have a say in the decisions that affect our lives. That means a union, and that means a contract." Workers have organized in the store amidst a historic rise in organizing efforts over the last couple years, including the first union at an Amazon warehouse and over 200 Starbucks branches organizing within 6 months. That's kind of amazing, and it says a lot for the power of labor right now. It is so important as we are in the sort of death throes of this capitalist culture that workers stand together to demand dignity and fair wages, living wages, and contracts to be sure to better ensure that workers are treated fairly. The Washington Post reports that petitions for union elections this year are on track to hit their highest level in a decade. And that is everything to do with, as the Washington Post reports, a hot labor market. What is that? What does that mean? Yes, there's in fact a labor shortage. You might have noticed so many signs looking for employee help.
This goes back to the frame I was talking about.
It does. It does. It does indeed. So, this hot labor market, the Washington Post points out, has afforded workers more leverage on their employers. Go frickin' figure. That really their profits don't exist without your labor, right? It's not like they can just sort of reach into the air and say, yeah, my store is going to make bank today because, oh, I don't have anyone to stock the shelves or cash people out. They're working on laborless stores. They really are. But so far they don't got them. And labor, it's essential. Organize like it is. I'm so happy to see this effort from the Trader Joe workers in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Go workers.
Well, they dominate their labor. I mean, they dominate their media. And so they frame this discussion as like, oh, the poor employers, oh, wages might go up. It's a hot market. There's a labor shortage. These are all lies. These are horrible lies. People do everything. Young people do everything right. They go to school. They get a degree. They get a second degree. They go into the market they got their degree for. They have, and when you
still can't make a living wage.
You can't make enough with one job to pay for your damn apartment, not even a house.
And not to mention your student loans, right?
Yeah, and there's the student loans,
so
and then there's healthcare.
It's the system at this point is predatory. We know that.
Yeah, it is the worst it's ever been. And they talk about, oh, the workers are asking for too much. No, we're not.
So, go workers, keep organizing. It's been an impressive year for labor organizing efforts, and more power to it. It is important. Carry on.
Hi, John.
You're going to go.
I have another one. Yes. Okay. So, speaking of jobs, lawmakers get wonderful jobs in lobbying, generally speaking, but also just cush things that are handed out. And this is part of the corruption of Congress. It isn't just direct cash contributions. It's you and your extended family and anyone you care about can get these jobs, cushy middle-class jobs, and sometimes better than middle class, that are offered you either directly or hinted at by people who are lobbying you for something that they want for their corporation. This has been going on and on and on and on. And so a 2007 law, I'm reading now from an article in The Lever by Eleanor Egan. 2007 law requires retiring lawmakers to notify a congressional ethics committee when they begin negotiating for a new job. And I can remember that. I was just like, wow, the revolving door, broken at last. Well, she writes, in the last 15 years, since the law took effect, more than 500 federal lawmakers have retired, with many taking lucrative gigs as lobbyists, lawyers, or trade association officials, and only 18 departing representatives and senators have filed such disclosures. This year promises to be no different. 50 House members and a half dozen senators have announced plans to retire. Only one outgoing representative has notified an ethics panel about his post-congressional job prospects. One has notified.
So the revolving door that was supposed to say bring in transparency, it's more like people found a way to sort of grease it so it doesn't squeak at all, and they can just sort of slip through.
Yep, that revolving door is
Super
spinning like
fast.
a windmill. Loopholes in the 2007 ethics law and a lack of enforcement have allowed retiring lawmakers to routinely negotiate future jobs with corporate lobbying firms without ever notifying the public whom they are supposedly still representing. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act is what I'm talking about here. You can call it HLOGA if you want, passed 2007. So far this election cycle, at least 56 lawmakers has said they're retiring. If previous election cycles are any guide, the largest share are likely to join the influence industry on K Street. Now, I want to say about this that I found out about this because of journalism, but reading the article, you can tell that this journalist does not have an expense account. She can't go find out. She doesn't have the time to call the lawmakers, and especially she doesn't have the cash to go in person, which can be very important. Go out there and find people who know and ask the questions and create a more specific article. She's reporting on what she can find. She probably had to go another several articles. This is the state of journalism in America. We need journalism real bad. Just saying. And I know that y'all who watch this show have innovative ideas about what to do about that. So I'll let you go. Do you want to do the next headline?
Sure. Well, speaking of that revolving door and lobbying efforts, no one should say lobbying doesn't pay off.
Oh, boy.
I just want to dig a little deeper past the celebratory headlines yesterday that the Build Back Better legislation, by any other name, finally got the go-ahead from Manchin. Since when does everything... Don't even get me started on Manchin and the undue amount of power that man has in cinema, for that matter.
Yeah.
Anyways, finally got the go-ahead, finally got the approval from Manchin, and a lot of folks celebrated, and I certainly was pretty happy, still am, that it didn't just die outright. There's a lot of important stuff in that legislation. But it is also important to know that $200 million that the oil and gas lobby has spent over the last couple of years has, well, paid off for them. Even while the Hallmark legislation is being touted as the most important legislation this country's ever passed or is on the verge of passing to deal with the climate catastrophe that looms large, it's important to know that if you dig down into the small print, parts of the bill require drilling in the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of Alaska. Why would a bill require fucking drilling in two environmentally sensitive areas, as if any part of the ocean is not environmentally sensitive? It's all connected. In these two areas that have seen repeated catastrophes of oil spills and the havoc they play to the wildlife and to the lives of the people in the area who rely on fishing and who rely on having a functional environment in which to live. What are we thinking? Putting in legislation that requires drilling. Another potential boon is the bill's mandate that oil and gas sales be held, oil and gas lease sales be held before the federal government can greenlight new solar and wind development projects. Like, what the hell? So an unnamed lobbyist told Politico, if you look at the pros and cons, the pros generally outweigh the cons. That's an unnamed oil and gas lobbyist. The Easter eggs that Manchin forced into the bill on leasing are a big deal, this unnamed lobbyist said. So that said, the president of Earth Justice notes that the Inflation Reduction Act injects $369 billion into programs to support renewable energy production and innovation and creates the clean energy economy that can power this country into the future, while finally spending real money to clean up deadly fossil fuels pollution. She says that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and she urges the Senate to seize upon it. And at the same time, she does also mention that we have to recognize that many provisions of the bill hold back progress. That tax credits that extend the life of dirty coal plants will make it harder to reach critical targets for clean power, and that it's an outrage that the deal would undermine historic investments in clean energy by holding wind and solar projects hostage to massive new oil and gas leasing off our coasts and on our public lands. So, little from column A, little from column B.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, and I'll try to keep it minimal, though. But
Let's say
the
it.
thing
No,
is
just
that,
by
so
all
the
means.
drilling, it's been said that this will cut U.S. emissions by 40% by the end of the decade. That's the win. The other parts, the drilling, that's to make Manchin look good for his cretinous Confederate flag waving base, not his power base. His power base is the corporations. These are the people that he strings along. So I could see why that is in there. I was surprised by the bill, the way it was presented. The Republicans are infuriated by it and took it out on veterans because they're Republicans. I mean, there's no reason.
Right. That is kind of horrific.
Yeah, really.
And underscores their duplicitous and monstrous natures.
Yes.
Okay.
So the thing is, Senator Bernie Sanders, came out with a $10 trillion over 10 years plan that would have ended poverty in the United States and ended the climate crisis. Out of the question. Oh, socialism, terrible. So Biden came up with something like a third of that, which was called Build Back Better. It had some climate provisions like anything, but what Senator Sanders said, because that would just be an absolute betrayal of our, birthright to allow great capitalists to suck the blood out of us. So this is a tenth of that.
Proudly serving our corporate masters.
Yeah, this is about a tenth of that. This is $300 billion. This is not $3 trillion over 10 years. It's 300 something billion. And that is all that is required for a 40% reduction. I will predict that the cost of oil, if the solar panels and the wind generation goes out the way the 300 billion could make it happen, the cost of drilling oil will be prohibitive, and so those oil wells will not be drilled. But it's up to us to promote. Well, it's not up to us as individuals. I don't want to fall for that BP line, but I mean politically, this is a good direction. I'm happy about it. And so I had
I think it falls into the better than nothing category.
It's
I mean, and if
40% reduction is very substantial.
That's very substantial.
We'll breathe a lot better.
No, that's huge. And again, not to slag it, but I think I'm with the president of Earth Justice, Abigail Dillon, who's again saying that we need to seize upon this opportunity for sure. But good Lord, it's basically
it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction, and it's gutting itself at the same time.
Yeah, and like I was saying about the economics, we need to understand the big picture, which is we are being absolutely crushed by the rich, the worst maldistribution of wealth in history. At the same time, the planet is being destroyed. Those people are still in power. We still need a revolution, REVOLUTION revolution. We've got to have it or we shall die. So I was going to talk about this threat.
I like it when you get so emphatic. You're kind of like, oh, do you need another cup of coffee?
Yes, I do.
Yes, surely.
I think I just did this Dr. Strangelove thing where God knows where I put my cup of coffee.
I honestly have no idea.
Clever about hiding that from myself. Anyway.
Carry on, dear.
So I was going to talk about the threatened war with China. Oh, thank you. You're kind.
This is true love.
Sorry about the lipstick stain. And
true love.
But I realize that it is not news you're not supposed to know, which is kind of my standard for a lot of this stuff, by and large. Although I'm not sure how many people realize that an aircraft carrier group, which is a hell of a lot of ships, planes, and missiles, bombs, and nuclear weapons, will go, or actually are going to Taiwan because Nancy's going to fly there. This is a stupid thing to do at this time. It is a deliberate provocation of China, really deliberate provocation by the United States, which is really good at this. So there are similarities with the Ukraine war. For example, the Russians said, I now understand, having reanalyzed, I was so in error about the Ukraine war, but having reanalyzed that, I can see that the Russians were telling each other, Putin was telling them, but they were also telling each other that Ukraine was just this mutinous, stupid backwater that really belonged to Russia. They needed to go in there and just really beat them up and tell them, and show them what was right and punish them for their moral failure. An ugly sentiment, which we see acted out by the soldiers. So, now I can see that. I can see how it was inevitable. Plus, there were the provocations by the United States, which were onerous indeed. Thousands dead is what the United States did. And
what are you talking about?
I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, but I've lost the thread, and
I'm talking
I
about
think it's
the
important.
provocations of Russia.
The thousands dead.
Thousands died over a period of 10 years or 8 years from artillery bombings of the Donetsk region. We don't get that news ever. We'll never get that news.
Okay, now I see what you're. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Go ahead and say that in the wrong, and just about everywhere is the wrong form in the United States, and you'll be vilified for saying it, and you'll be told you're a liar. So, unfortunately, China is doing the same thing. They're saying Taiwan is. 20 years ago, this wasn't true. 20 years ago, I didn't give a flying if China took Taiwan because it wasn't going to be particularly violent at that point. But now Xi got in power and he started vilifying the heck out of the Taiwanese and saying that everything that the Americans were ever guilty of and the Chinese are taught a long, long list of all things Americans are guilty of, and it's true, actually. But it's done to make them hate Americans. They're saying that Taiwanese are just as guilty. They are collaborating with the Americans, that they are a mutinous province that really belongs to China and must be punished. This is the same shit. It's terrible. So this is a terrible provocation.
So this is the backdrop against which Nancy Pelosi has visited.
Yes, and it could be. It looks like a provocation for a nuclear war because China can possibly overcome one U.S. carrier group. Not 2 or 3, I don't think so. They don't have anything like that kind of weaponry, either in sophistication or in numbers. But one carrier group, what? Anyway, this is bad, is what I'm saying. So
what I'm hearing you say is it's bad.
Yes. So I have another headline item. Shall I go to that?
Please.
Okay, so the U.S. Supreme Court is supposed to be above politics, but I guess we aren't even pretending that's the case anymore. That's what Laura Bassett writes in Jezebel. She writes, at a religious liberty summit in Rome, conservative Justice Samuel Alito mocked foreign leaders who condemned the Supreme Court's decision last month that overturned Roe v. Wade. And actually, this is on Democracy Now! Too, I noticed. A group, she writes, that included Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, French President Emmanuel Macron, Prince Harry, she says, sure, ? And soon-to-be former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who recently resigned following several scandals. Johnson had called Supreme Court decision in Dobbs a backward step, which, if you know anything about Johnson at all, is pretty humiliating for the United States. But Alito used this as his punchline. He's quoted saying, I had the honor this term of writing, I think, the only Supreme Court decision in the history of that institution that has been lambasted by a whole string of foreign leaders who felt perfectly fine commenting on American law. That was a laugh line for him. And then he followed with, one of these was former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but he paid the price. Now, this is a weird thing to say, unless you know Alito, who really thinks that he is the prime warrior of God. This is the kind of crazy asshole we have in the United States.
It's the Opus Dei? Is this where Opus Dei comes in? Or
he thinks he is an Opus Dei, but no,
okay.
Not specifically. And she writes, of course, Johnson's exit of government had nothing to do with his comments on abortion. And frankly, the workings of the British government is so beyond irrelevant here, but we should talk about the fact that a sitting Supreme Court justice is going on an international speech tour bragging about taking away human rights from half his country. Alito said sarcastically, quote, what really wounded me was when the Duke of Sussex addressed the United Nations and seemed to compare the decision, whose name may not be spoken, with the Russian attack on Ukraine. And that's an end quote. And I delivered that rather dramatically, but that's how snotty the man is. So Bassett goes on to describe Alito's comments as he takes the World Victory Tour versus women's rights. Alito takes the tone that Christians who enjoy hegemony worldwide as the world's largest, richest, and most powerful religion are only now getting just payback in a tiny way for being forced to endure imagined marginalization. For Alito, marginalization means others getting abortions being a violation of his right to believe that no one should. That's how convoluted his thinking is, and is echoed by millions. Extremely dangerous. I think he should be impeached for that sort of shit, and I think that Clarence Thomas should be impeached for his wife's hokey fundraising and scaremongering and insurrection raising, which he participated in. Yeah, he was in on that. Should impeach him and find out. So that gets down to the end of my comments. I know that earlier you were talking about.
Well, to just sort of go on Alito there for a moment. Again, this is very weird, very on point, I guess, is probably more accurate. Very on point for this sort of brand of religious demagoguery. It's the only issue here is that we in the U.S. hypothetically have that First Amendment, which separates church and state and allows us freedom from religion as well as the freedom to affiliate with the religion to which you feel called. Not sure if that grammatically works out, but you know what I'm saying. Now I'm a witch, right? I believe that we are sovereign over our bodies, and a woman's right, a person's right to choose what to do with their own body is right for them. If that means wanting to become pregnant, so be it. If that means wanting to end a pregnancy, so be it. The types of birth control one chooses to use or not use, up to you. Decorating your body, should you choose to pierce or tattoo any of these things, up to you. You find that your gender differs from the identity you were assigned at birth. Again, this is up to you and should be worked out with yourself, your community, your doctor, your who you go to sort things out for yourself, right? That it does not have to do with the fucking church coming in and saying what's good and what's right for the entire populace, because the church knows.
But it impinges on the very profitable hegemony of men over women, the ability to decry women simply for being feminine, so that they can be stuck with raising children, paying for raising children, blamed for raising children, blamed for not raising children, everything.
The unpaid labor of the domestic.
Sneered at for cleaning, raged at for not cleaning, can't win.
It goes on. Sexism has been profitable, shall we say. But I also would say that Alito, a lot of people are saying he's attacking women's rights. I'd say he's attacking human rights.
Yeah.
Period. Because I don't think he's really looking to stop at this most recent decision that strips away Roe. Especially since he is fond of quoting, "Oh, damn, that guy's name just flew out of my head." The ancient cleric who's not entirely sure women have souls. Since who was involved in witch hunts, for God's sakes, of the literal kind.
The guy who was fighting the breakout of the Enlightenment.
Yeah. So this is like Alito's guy. It doesn't stop here, right? And that's why Congress just went on to codify marriage as being between two adults who choose to marry each other preserving interracial marriage as well as same-sex marriage, because we see that that's likely where the court will be taking aim next. Also,
did they get that passed? The last
the
I heard,
Congress,
COVID got in the way and they couldn't get to the vote.
Congress passed it.
Oh, okay.
It has not, I don't believe, gone before Senate. Should have looked into that.
Yes.
Anyway, also around issues of birth control, I think that it's to have a judge basically saying that the right to privacy just is an imaginary thing, at the same time as he's aligning himself with the far radical religious right. It's a terrifying moment in our history. And so how do we deal with the highest law given, law clarifying body being out of control and going for a theocracy? How do we deal with that as a republic, as a democracy? How do we deal with that?
Pack the court is what I'd like to see. At least, it can't happen until we the idea out there. So let's pack the court. I mean, there's nothing.
You mean increase the number of jurors?
Yes, it's not. The number is not specified in the Constitution. We've got a bunch of nuts in there. We should pack the court.
And when you say nuts, you mean religious fundamentalists who
Yes.
are looking to strip rights away from the citizenry and give them to the corporations and the churches.
Right, but we can't pack the court unless we win in the midterms. And I say we very, very broadly there.
Ooh. Yeah, vote blue no matter who.
Yeah, 'cause the Democrats would be only so happy to throw people like me under the bus and just be done with me. So, yeah, that's the state of things.
Yeah, that doesn't look good. We'll get back to that next week. Well, more on that next week.
You had an interesting idea talking about
So,
saw something from a Republican fundraiser about Pelosi.
Exactly. About that vote blue no matter who. Who are you? There's such a fight in the Democratic Party between the progressives and others. When I say others, I'm going to say like Pelosi, the establishment Dems, right? Pelosi, who backed the dude in Texas, who is an establishment Dem, even though he was anti-choice, right? Even though he was just actually terrible on so many issues. But, he wasn't that progressive woman that, that Ocasio-Cortez was backing. So what to do about this, right? How do we take control of the Democratic Party? That's a wacky phrase that I never thought would come out of my mouth.
The right, she's like
she's the scourge, Pelosi, and so
it's like that image of her doing that cringe ass stuff with a prayer cloth on, kneeling in the hallway.
Well, and so this is actually that I heard a radio ad the other day, wherein a far right candidate for Congress actually implored you to vote for her because she was the only one gutsy enough to stand up to the woke Pelosi and the woke Biden crowd.
It'd be nice if she was woke.
In my dreams, we would be dealing with a woke Pelosi. But that is not who we have, right? We've got this establishment catering woman who, has done some good things for sure, has done some good things. Certainly stood up to quite a few of the more atrocious things that the Trump administration was doing. But now here we have the Democrats in power in all of the legislative branches. And what are we seeing? We're seeing her doing these things like Teresa was just talking about, going to Taiwan, provoking war. Certainly feeling great about record-breaking military spending, and not really doing a whole lot to counter say the climate catastrophe, advancing human rights, any of that, right? That's not where she's at. She is about propping up the establishment because it's good for business, and that's where she's at. And so immediately I'm just like, what in what world? In what world do these people live that can say things like Biden's socialism and the woke Pelosi and not say it ironically, that they actually seem to believe this. And it brought me around to the point that Teresa and I have spoken to before, and that is we lack as a nation at this time critical thinking skills. And so if you hear propaganda, if you hear things like, oh, we have to fight the woke crowd is looking to get your way of life and make you woke too. And of course, no one wants to be woke. What does this even mean? What are they even talking about? What is woke now code for? Because it's just sort of being put out there without definition. It is the bugaboo. It is the bad thing, and it's being picked up by people who have not had any encouragement towards critical thinking, and probably have had no opportunity to really engage in good critical thinking or debate skill, because we don't really do that anymore in schools. That was in danger of provoking independent thought and creative people. And that's those are harder to control when you are for the establishment. So that was sort of where I went. In what world is Nancy Pelosi woke? Um, I asked that on Twitter, and I got a couple of responses, which I guess I kind of knew in what world she was woke. It's in the world of the radical right. It's in the world of the mega hats, because they only think in sound bites. They cannot think past the propaganda that has been shoved at them, and that's I guess my opening thoughts on that. You
It brings up that
care
sort
to
of
engage?
balance in my mind on how to deal with people who are like that. I mean, socialists, I believe, people generally have an obligation to take care of people who are stupid or marginally stupid or who are temporarily stupid because of their ideology. We have a human obligation to care for those people. If they begin to exterminate themselves, then we need to step in. That's not being a snot. That's just being a mensch. That's doing the right thing. On the other hand, very poorly educated people have been very effectively organized by their hatreds, by the team that has pulled this off. It hasn't just been Trump. They haven't all been in complete collusion. It's just that forces have brought them together. Trump came about as a result of Zuckerberg's very profitable siloing and what's the word for causing an inflammation of the passions.
He to polarize.
He polarizes. His Facebook, his Instagram separates people and causes them to be angry at each other because it is so profitable for one group to rail at another group. And he has been
not so much on Instagram.
Good. He has been instrumental in creating this near civil war situation that we have in the United States. So the fact is, the effectively organized, Confederate flag waving MAGA heads have to be defeated before they can be helped. So we have to balance that, I guess.
Right. And well, I think, again, getting around to critical thinking, as much as we can explain and counter, as much as we can just counter the narrative. Countering the narrative, woke is bad. I remember 20 years ago when the term was politically correct instead of woke. And I remember being at a meeting at a very progressive place wherein a white guy who was from a pretty well-off background was talking about these politically correct police, telling him that he can't do and say, things that he wants to do and say.
Not real police, but
No, not real police. Those that would check you for not being politically correct. And he had gone on for a minute. And this was sort of after a few weeks, weekly meetings, and the guy would sort of run the same spiel at the beginning as we gather together.
Sort of casually, basically shitting on marginalized groups. And
and so that's sort of the thing that one of my colleagues finally looked up and said, can I ask you, what's wrong with being politically correct? I had thought that being politically correct meant that we were concerned about how marginalized groups are treated and about trying to increase access to power for all parties. Isn't that what being politically correct means? And if that is, why is that a problem? And it was an interesting dynamic shift, because in fact he had to think past what he was saying. He was parroting the words of edgy comedians and
Rush Limbaugh at the time.
Well, no, he wasn't. Sure, Rush Limbaugh was saying that too, but so were a lot of edgy comedians that could sort of qualify as maybe left of center, right? The edgelords that poke fun at everyone. They're not bigoted; they just make fun of everyone. Mm-hmm. And when I say left of center, they more or less are defenders of free speech. And all of these, if you're only listening to the audio of this, God help you, because I'm doing air quotes a mile a minute here. Anyways, I thought that was very good, because at the time I remember I was just about at my limit and I wanted to just sort of yell out, "The hell is wrong with you? Do you hear the shit falling from your mouth?" That would have been far less effective than my colleagues' more Socratic, what do you mean by politically correct? I think it means this. What do you think it means? And then why is that a problem for you? I think we can start doing that, and we need to start doing that with woke. There is a whole lot of the use of this term. Our woke campuses, as Ted Cruz struts around some stage at a politically conservative student group conference, struts around a stage and sort of tries out a really bad stand-up comedy act now, right? This is the new look for a senator. So, as he's talking about taking on the woke campuses that are making you think this and that are indoctrinating you to think this and that, the hell, right?
And he uses the plural and the singular mixed in wrongly in one sentence, even though he's Yale educated, because he's trying to appeal. He thinks he's just blazingly clever.
I think he just stepped on his own punchline, because he's not a stand-up comedian, and he's really foolish in not the good sense of the word.
He's well educated, though.
He is well educated. It don't make him smart. Those are different things. I don't think Ted Cruz is smart. That said, he is certainly villainous and effective to his base. So what does this all, what does it mean? To actually get people to define what they mean by woke, I think is good. To invite people to think more analytically, more deeply about their reactions, to think past sound bites, to think past knee-jerk responses. I'm having to do this a lot with not casting off all of the Democratic Party, as I had for most of my adult voting life, having seen very few examples of people championing rights for the likes of me. Well, now I can say that there is a strong wedge in the party that should be supported. So I can't just say Democrats this, that, or the other, and I have to actually choose my words and think past sound bites, right? And so how it is that we can help each other think past those sound bites is really essential right now.
Yes.
Okay. Discussion is winding down. And that leaves me to look at Tarot for this week, and also to look at our harvest season. This is the week that we'll see Lammas or Lunasa. It is the festival of the first harvest, the end of the as we transition into fall, as we notice the sun, the hues of the sun are becoming more golden, as we move into the the end of summer. So Lammas, the festival of the first bread, it's celebrated on the 1st or 2nd of August. It is the pagan holiday, that the witches' holiday that falls between summer solstice and fall equinox. And so it's a time to really celebrate with your friends, with your fam, with those that, I had thought about having a nice big gathering and thought better of it once I saw the pandemic figures again for this week. So, but celebrate with those you can, those that are close to you. Bake bread, bake things, celebrate life, continuing on. Um, we also have at this time a new moon. New moon was last night, but we're still in the phase of newness. It's a good time to meditate and to get very clear on what it is that you are needing to say. Uh, Getting clear on your thoughts and perspectives so that you can share them with others. And that is the gift of the new moon in Leo. Um, and now for the tarot. So 2 5s and a queen. That's what I got for my hand this week. Um, they look like this. So we'll start here in the 5 of Pentacles. 5 of Pentacles talks about poverty. It talks about resources feeling scarce, maybe lacking. It talks about maybe physically struggling. And I think that is not an unfamiliar situation for many of us. It also talks about the strength of community to pull through. And as we see in the other 2 cards, it's reflected that we need each other, and systems of mutual aid are our best and shiningest hope. So we have the 5 of Pentacles. We also have the 5 of Swords. And this is about conflict that is coming to, trying to get resolved. How it's being resolved maybe isn't going to work long term. If you've been struggling with people in your family, in your friendship groups, in your community, turning your back and just sort of walking away from the struggle goes so far. It might have an immediate sort of cessation of hostilities as you pull away, but that doesn't necessarily resolve things. And so to remember, first find peace and balance, but then look for resolution, because that's the only thing that's really going to last. And finally, the Queen of Cups, which sort of brings things together in a way that says ultimately we have to base our actions in love. We have to let ourselves feel the strong affinities that we have, and that we can be guided to guided through the current sort of maelstrom as we listen to our hearts. It is a time that we may be seeking comfort, and it is a fine thing to do, seek comfort, be with each other, support each other. In the end, all we have is each other. And that ain't nothing. That's actually very strong. So, as we maybe struggle with some material concerns, as we work our way through harder times where we aren't getting along, understand that we need each other and that we need to support each other. And yeah, that's it. Community based in heart, based in truth, and mutual aid.
Thanks for that. Well,
And so,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's what we have for this week.
Yeah. Well, it kind of brought me back to thinking, I hope that somehow we can break this propaganda grip that so many people are in, where we have the situation of the worst wealth distribution ever. I think one of the ways, or a couple of the ways that they keep us looped in is by saying, oh, you're middle class. There are people who are living in tents who will tell you that they're middle class. I mean, it's just an amazingly powerful piece of propaganda. Apparently, you wouldn't think so, but it is. And people don't want to admit to being working class. So we have to beat that. But the other thing I think is there was this brief period, like you could center it on, like, let's say 1957, in which the wealth distribution was briefly, because of the tax base, basically, because great wealth was taxed at something like 90%. There was a distribution of wealth among the citizens of the United States so that you could count on just going to high school. If you took shop, you'd get a job and you'd have enough for a house and look after your little family. And, you could be the only breadwinner and that would be just fine. You would be middle class. And so they're always teasing that. It's like, oh, if you people would just be a bit more moral, if it'd be more pure, if you'd pay more into police, we could get back to that. No, none of those things are going to work to cause that distribution of wealth to happen again. We have to tax the rich at over 90%. That's what does it. That's what moves it economically.
But if you tax the rich that much, why? What would be their incentive to be rich?
Oh, they seem to have found a way, even in the 50s, to be filthy rich and to aggregate as much as they possibly could.
Yes.
Because 10% of $1 billion is more money than you can spend in your life.
Yes. All right. And none of you have a good imagination.
Okay. Can be done.
Thank you very much for joining us this week. Please do subscribe. Tell your friends and family that we exist. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and leave your comments below. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, really. Thanks very much.
And we'll be back next week.
Bye-bye. And all the ships at sea.